the missing men. Meanwhile, hundreds of people are still pouring into Malta to escape the unrest in Libya. Indian evacuees have been some of the latest to arrive. More than 300 people were on board a ship chartered by the Indian government. A number of people from Bangladesh and the Philippines were also evacuated at the same time. And that is the very latest from here in Europe for the moment. Back now to David in Doha. David.
Thank you very much indeed. Now, worldwide efforts underway to try and repatriate those foreign nationals who are fleeing the violence in Libya. Pakistan, for example, has got more than 18,000 in the country, and the government of Pakistan now facing criticism about the way it's handled the evacuation. Kamal Haider reports from Islamabad.
This might be the first time these Pakistani oil workers come back home empty-handed. No presents for the family and no wages. Despite having lost everything, they're grateful to be home. Stranded at the airport for days and without food, many shared their experience of the ordeal.
The situation was very critical in Libya. We were lucky enough to save our lives.
While they praised their local Libyan employees for helping them leave, they've complained their own embassy did little to help.
We are very happy on our soil, but the government of Pakistan has done nothing for us.
Pakistani embassy officials maintain they are working with the local authorities in Tunisia, Algeria, Egypt and Turkey, and officials have been dispatched to the Libyan border to receive its citizens. As Pakistan joined the long list of countries to evacuate its stranded citizens, there's criticism abound that government is doing too little too late, offering sympathy but little support to some 18,000 Pakistanis still left behind in Libya. Kamal Haider, AlJazeera, Islamabad.
A senior US senator is warning that US ground troops in Libya would be, quote, counterproductive. John Kerry, though, also said the international community should now begin preparations for a no-fly zone in the event of a massacre of civilians by the Libyan Air Force. Our man in our Washington, D.C. News Center with more on that is Nick Clark.
David, thanks very much. Yes, the man you're talking about, John Kerry, is one of the leading foreign policy voices in the United States. He works closely with the White House, and he indicated that any kind of ground force in Libya is very much a last option. But during an interview on US television, he also said that $30 billion of Gaddafi's assets had been frozen and would be made available to the opposition for, quote, a new Libya. He also said the opposition was only now just beginning to shape itself. Kerry said it is in the American national interest for Gaddafi to step down because of the, quotes, mischief he threatens in the future, and that America was making its presence felt in the region by offering humanitarian assistance. Let's speak to John Terrett, AlJazeera's John Terrett. He's been monitoring all these comments. And of course, John, the administration has been at pains to say how difficult it would be to implement a no-fly zone, but there's still pressure being applied.
Well, that's absolutely right, Nick. And John Kerry, who is a very leading Democratic senator here in the United States from Massachusetts, was agreeing with a lot of that, but saying that it's important preparations for a no-fly zone go ahead in case Colonel Gaddafi continues to massacre his civilian population. Now, speaking on one of the popular Sunday broadcast programs today, John Kerry said that a no-fly zone should go ahead despite concerns that it could look like American military intervention or action. And in this clip, as you'll hear, John Kerry disagrees with the US Defense Secretary Robert Gates, who feels that such imposition of a no-fly zone would be seen as an attack on Libya. John Kerry disagrees strongly with that view.
One, prepare a no-fly zone in conjunction with our allies, not implement it. Certainly, first hope would be, if it were called on, to be done only in the context of international agreement and sanction. But right now, they don't want that, and I think that's good. The last thing we want to think about is any kind of military intervention, and I don't consider the fly zone stepping over that line. We don't want troops on the ground. They don't want troops on the ground. That would be counterproductive.
Well, we also heard today from Bill Daley, who is the new White House Chief of Staff, and he said that he was confident that the U.S. and its allies could coordinate a global response to Libya, but that the president understands this can't be done without international backing. And that kicks back at something else that Senator Kerry said. He implied that a no-fly zone could go ahead without the backing of the Security Council. Difficult but possible, Nick.
Meanwhile, John, talking of the Security Council, there's been movement at the UN, a committee being formed to implement the sanctions, to oversee the sanctions that were brought in on, February the 26th?
Yeah, that's right. And Al Jazeera is learning that Portugal will be named on Tuesday as the new chair country of the Libya Sanctions Committee. Now, non-permanent members of the Security Council always chair these committees, and I'm told that the work is going to start immediately, or certainly by Wednesday, though they hope it doesn't go on very long because they hope Colonel Gaddafi will stand down. It's being seen as a reward for Portugal, which has done well in chairing a North Korea committee at the Security Council, but also because Portugal is seen as a sort of neutral Western country, as it were, that really doesn't have much involvement in the Middle East, North Africa region. And for that reason, they've chosen the country. But of course, it's going to be very difficult nonetheless to get a resolution through on a no-fly zone in the Security Council with Russia, France and China, countries with vetoes in the Security Council, having already spoken up against the idea. Nick?
All right, John, thanks very much indeed. That's John with the latest there on the no-fly zone and comments from Senator John Kerry. All right, well, as you'll have gathered, there's been a lot of talk, but so far no action about the United Nations imposing a no-fly zone over Libya. Kristen Salumi now takes a look at the UN's past record on implementing such a measure.
Please, United Nations, save Libya.
The impassioned pleas of the Libyan delegation to the United Nations inspired the international community to enact sanctions against Libya's Muammar Gaddafi and sparked what has become an international debate over one possible next step, a no-fly zone.
Something has to be done concerning the declaring a non-fly zone on all the cities of Libya.
The last time the UN Security Council authorized a no-fly zone was in 1992 over Bosnia during that country's civil war. It took a year to get all members of the council on board.
Do you think the Security Council will get around to imposing a no-fly zone?
I think it's very likely if the conflict doesn't end soon, if the humanitarian situation gets worse.
Mohammed Sakrbi was Bosnia's UN ambassador at the time.
Yes, Bosnia is Europe, Libya is North Africa, but it seems that overwhelmingly there is a similar desire to see the UN Security Council be more assertive in bringing the conflict to an end, as well as helping the civilian population.
But it's the no-fly zone imposed on Iraq in the 90s and kept in place for more than a decade that gives some Security Council diplomats pause. Enacted primarily by the U.S. and the United Kingdom, without international backing, it is now associated with the controversial U.S.-led invasion of Iraq. Some diplomats, including veto-wielding members China and Russia, have expressed reservations about taking action that could be seen as promoting regime change and that could set the stage for long-term military commitments. But Sakrbi believes the Security Council has already crossed that line.
There is not only a cost to intervention,